Welcome to Legal Keys, unlocking time, revenue, and results. The podcast that connects you with the people, technologies, and trending topics shaping the modern legal landscape. From cutting-edge AI innovations to high-growth marketing strategies and everything in between. Legal Keys is your go-to resource for actionable insights. Brought to you by Faster Outcomes and hosted by Tim Sawyer, two-time Inc. 500 co-founder entrepreneur. We're here to help you navigate the tools and trends driving success in today's legal world.
Hello, and welcome to Legal Keys, sponsored by Faster Outcomes. Faster Outcomes is a legal intelligence platform for lawyers and law firms of all shapes and sizes. If this is your first time listening, you picked a great episode to join us. You're going to love today's guest. If this has been with us before, we appreciate the support and continue for you to share and like about the program. With that said, I took a little extra time to get ready today because our guest deserves it. With enormous amount of respect, I am super excited to introduce Niki Black. She's a lawyer, legal tech strategist, author, and thought leader with over 2 decades of experience helping lawyers adapt to emerging technologies. She currently serves as principal legal insight strategist at Affinipay, where she works across platforms like MyCase, LawPay, CasePeer, and DocketWise. She is the author of Cloud Computing for Lawyers and co-author of Social Media for Lawyers, which I think is a really cool topic. Would love to sneak a question or two in about that. The Next Frontier, both published by the American Bar Association. Nicole is not only one of the most recognized voices in legal tech, but also a deeply thoughtful communicator, which you'll notice today, who blends professional insight with authenticity and relatability. Niki, we appreciate you taking the time, and welcome to Legal Keys.
Sure, thanks. Looking forward to talking to you.
Great. So in that we are in the AI space, what I thought that the first question I want to do is get your take as a legal tech expert on, and the way I want to frame the question is, in terms of sentiment, adoption, understanding, apprehension, where is the legal community at with AI as we sit today?
So I actually have data on that. I author our, Affinipay has a legal industry report that we put out every year, and I authored that report. And the one that we published a couple of months ago, the data shows that 27% of firms have actually implemented AI, and 31% of legal professionals are using AI in their day-to-day. So the legal professionals are a little bit further ahead than the firms, and I think it's more that they're just sort of using it off the books, and the firms haven't fully adopted it. But it's interesting because even though those numbers don't sound super high, AI has only been around 2.5 years, so the levels of adoption of generative AI is what that data was. Levels of adoption of generative AI are going up significantly faster than they have with the technologies that preceded it, whether it's mobile, the cloud, social media. You know, the lawyers are adopting, legal professionals are adopting AI at really unprecedented rates, but there are all sorts of areas, concerns that they have that prevent them from full-on adoption right now. And it, you know, there's ethical issues, and there's still some that are up in the air. There's accuracy issues, and until those are really hammered out and we have the ability to provide more accurate, almost 100%, but not quite, because I don't think you can ever have 100% accuracy. But until a lot of those issues are ironed out, and some confidentiality issues, concerns about what's happening with their data, you're not going to see full-scale adoption. It's just going to be very challenging until we're able to get the tech moved along a little bit.
Now, inside those numbers, do you see by size of law firm, is it larger law firms that are adopting quicker, or is it tend to be sole practitioners, smaller shops that are adopting faster? Are you seeing that trend?
Well, it's an interesting question. And in the report this year, we parsed the data both just overall by practice area and by firm size. Selectively, I sort of pulled out the most interesting data points across the report, across the survey results for those different categories. And when it comes to firm size, it is, there are some differences, and I think you're seeing the way we have with prior tech, that mid-sized firms, however you define that, which is sort of a murky concept depending on who you're talking to, are the slowest to adopt to any tech. And I think you're seeing that with artificial intelligence as well. But solos are the most easily able to adopt and implement tech and pivot. But sometimes AI can be cost prohibitive for them. And then larger firms, I think, are very much sold on the idea. It just takes them a long time to choose the right tools, roll them out, train everybody on them. And some of our data also showed that lawyers and decision makers in firms are viewing this with an eye towards reducing tasks and in some cases reducing roles over time. So, that's another interesting aspect. In the larger firms, I think, have a more vested interest in it from that viewpoint, if you will.
So you bring up an interesting question, and as someone who spends a lot of time in the field at conferences talking with lawyers, so the question that comes up, if you look at the different types of law, so if you have contingency-based law, cost savings is great, right? You want to get the bottom line, get the house bottom line we can, and minimize costs, no brainer. But it gets a little murky when you get to monthly billing. Right. So if you've got a large firm, 25, medium-sized lawyers, we tend to work with 15 to 20 lawyers. How are you having conversations with lawyers about that? Like, how are they working through that issue of, okay, this document used to take me 10 hours, now it takes me 1, but I bill $300 an hour or $500 an hour or $700 an hour. How are they navigating that? Are you guys talking about that at all?
Well, I'm on a webcast every Friday with a bunch of other legal technology journalists, some of my colleagues, and we talk about that all the time. It's, there are people, and I sort of agree with this premise, that it may upend the billable hour finally. People have been saying for years that technology was going to be the death of the billable hour, and I think AI may actually lead to that result. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. It's going to take some time. And I think there are going to be a couple of things that cause that to happen. One is that boutique firms where a large firm, and this is happening a lot because of all the political turmoil. Some people are leaving firms to start their own because they don't like the things that are happening with their large firm that they're in, and they're starting their own practices. And this has always historically happened. People will leave, take a bunch of clients, and they start a boutique practice with this very focused practice area. And when they do that, they have very strong incentives to come up with alternative and flat fee arrangements to be more competitive, use technology to allow them to not have to bill by the hour and undercut the large law firms. And so that's going to be one thing that you'll see happening, is that these mid-sized firms and also these boutique firm spinoffs are going to be able to provide more competitive flat fee and alternative fee rates for clients. And they're going to go to the firms and say, listen, you're telling me you're going to charge $1,000 an hour for this, because you're a large law firm. Over here, they're telling me they're going to charge me this flat fee or this alternative fee arrangement. It's going to be, at the end of the day, half as much as, at least, as what you're going to be charging me.
Right.
And so that there's going to be some incentive that way. I also think that the other people that are going to be particularly incentivized to start using these tools are when you have sophisticated clients, legal clients, whether it's insurance companies or corporate counsel. When corporate counsel use outside counsel, the corporate counsel are the legal buyers, right? They're the consumers of the.
Right.
And so insurance companies and corporate counsel are very sophisticated consumers. They're going to be able to have a very good understanding of how much it could have cost to you if they'd used AI. And so there's going to be client pressure from that end in those specific areas where you're going to see them refusing to pay or just insourcing it. You're going to find some in-house counsel just handling it themselves or doing a certain amount of it before handing it out, because that way they're going to save a lot of the grunt work by using AI and narrow the issues down before they hand it off. So you're going to see a lot of different pressures in the buying cycle from consumers to legal providers. And I think eventually it's going to force the death of the billable hour, but that's a hotly contested point, and a lot of my colleagues disagree. So we'll see.
It's interesting. And as we go out and we're trying to sign customers and build our customer base, sometimes you do actually hear the lawyers say, why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
Why would I ever want to do that, Tim? And I think, to your point, what's going to have to happen is going to be, it's got to come from the consumer, right? There's got to be enough pressure. And to your point, I think what's happening, particularly in the smaller firms, one of the conversations we have a lot is the average consumer, someone like me, a layperson, is doing as much as they can using open source AI tools, and then trying to go with this 70% product and say, hey, can you button this up for me? And so there's got to be some disincentive, because half the time it's wrong, right? And now you start off the relationship with, well, I don't want to pay for all that. I already did it on ChatGPT or Claude or wherever. And lawyers look at this isn't right. We got to start over. So there is some friction developing, or some tension developing that way, that might drive it. And to your point, that's a really good point about in-house counsel being the ultimate consumer, right? And they know what it would cost to get it done. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think what will happen is it'll have to start at the top, and then it'll trickle down. And it would be great, by the way, it'd be great for smaller AI companies like myself, because that opens up the market, right? So to your point, 27% implementation, 31% usage. There's a lot of room left in that. And what's interesting is, we've been around for a little over a year. And my hypothesis when we started the company was, gosh, I think we might be a little late, and there might be a lot of, I thought adoption levels were way further down the road than they were. But there's still a lot of room to go in this. And as you mentioned, the regulatory front seems to still be somewhat ambiguous, right? I looked up just the other day, there's not a lot coming from the states at all. There's not a lot coming from the local bar associations. There's a little bit out of ABA. What's your take on that? And what's the next shoe to drop, if you will, in terms of the regulatory environment?
Well, so I think you need to put that in the right context, and I'll push back on that a little bit. There has actually been, compared to the tech that preceded it, a significant amount of regulatory guidance, and it's been issued really quickly. I've actually been really impressed by the rate at which the bars have done this. And I mean this I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, when you don't quite have the context, because, I've been talking about tech for 20 years, and I've seen the rate at which they've rolled these opinions out with prior tech. And it is just, they were very quick. Certainly not all the bars have, right? The ABA did. And there have been a number of other bar associations. I want to say we're up to about 10 now. And you're correct that 10 is not 50 or 52, really. You've got DC, you've got ABA, Puerto Rico, and I think Guam. But, so there's other U.S. territories in addition to the 50 states. So I think Guam also has their own bar association. I'm not sure, though. They must. But in any event, while it's only, not even a quarter, that's still a significant amount of guidance. And they're even branching off in really interesting ways. Like I just wrote about the ABA's most recent opinion, which initially I thought was just about jury discrimination and ethical issues, which is what it's about. But they had a whole section where they talked about using AI tools that may help you choose jurors and things you need to think about when you do that. So they're actually starting to incorporate, they're not just writing opinions or guidance on AI overall. They're now starting to incorporate it into guidance on sort of peripheral topics, if you will, and making sure that they incorporate AI into them. So the guidance I think there's already more than enough guidance across the jurisdictions for lawyers to ultimately know what the standards are and what they need to be thinking about. The problem really is, and I use this term loosely when I say the problem, because my company's rolling out FinaPay has 4 different legal products, and we're rolling AI out as well. So, but the AI has to get to the point where it does have, you can guardrail it as much as you want in the back end. It's still going to hallucinate a little bit, because that's just where the tech is right now. And so until the technology gets to the point where a lot of these issues have been solved, which include the accuracy, which include the ability to ensure confidentiality, but also even issues of like ethics walls. If a large law firm's using these tools, and this was brought up in an opinion, I hadn't thought about it, and it was a really good point that they raised. If large law firms are using these AI tools, even if it's an enclosed environment where the law firm's data is safe and secure within that closed environment, some people in the law firm aren't allowed, because of ethics walls, and conflict of interest issues to see certain files because there's sort of a conflict. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with the conflicts. There's,
Yep,
but we like
I get the concept. Yep.
in law school, yeah. And so sometimes large law firms can take a client on that sort of is conflicting with another client because they have thousands of clients. But as long as they put these ethics walls in place where these two people or these two teams never see the other data,
Yeah.
then it's okay for them to keep these cases. So the AI has to even reflect that. They can't serve up in an answer, you know, I have a question about the Jones case, blah, 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 and Jones is also over here, and it gives this person that isn't supposed to ever see
info, yeah.
some info from the other one. So there's a lot of complexities that you start to run into that, and more of them are going to pop up over time as legal technology software companies roll these tools out. And I think, you know, I know you're a standalone AI company, but what happens is all these standalone AI companies pop up, or tech companies, and it becomes like whack-a-mole. This is just a process. This happens with any kind of software. And then
Yep, I
they
get
get fired and they go into other companies, or they start to succeed in their own right. And then, but at the end of the day, it's going to start to be the legal tech tools that have these tools built into them, and maybe one or two or three AI companies in each category that really succeed on their own right. And when you really, when those things happen and those companies start to really develop in depth and the tech gets where it needs to be, that's when you're going to start to see lawyers trusting the technology enough to adopt it en masse, for lack of a better way to describe it.
That is the crux. And it's interesting that you mentioned the whack-a-mole. There are a lot of companies that are emerging. What's interesting is the valuations around these companies are absolutely, you know, I'm one of the owners included. And, you know, when you've got companies in the billions that are 2-3 years in existence, and good for them. I don't begrudge them one penny. I hope they get, everybody gets as much as I had. 2 private equity exits myself. I'm grateful. I love that, and I hope it all goes well. But there's a lot of, what's your take on these valuations that you're seeing right now and we don't have to get into any one specific company, but what's your take in general on that?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, they're very high, and it's definitely, there's sort of an AI bubble across the board. There's so much potential, but it hasn't yet been realized. And the other thing about the legal market, that what happens every time PE and venture capital people come into it, is they see so much, it's green space, right? Not white space. I always get the two confused, but they see so much unvended, you know, but it's been unvended like that for a long time. And it's a nut that someone's got to crack. And that's what they're seeing coming into this, but that's what everybody's been seeing for decades coming into this with the different categories of software, right? And so they get really excited at all this unvended space and think that they've got the formula to crack it. You know, they all come in with their own different formulas and their own different ideas. And but the legal space is different. It's regulated. It's a risk-averse market. That's what lawyers' jobs are when you really think about it at their essence. Preventing past, present, or future risk for their clients, one way or another. They're very risk averse, and their licenses or livelihoods are on the line. So, and a lot of them have been practicing law very well, thank you so much, without any kind of tech at all. So they're not inclined to adopt it. I think AI is going to change that. I think I've had a lot of more seasoned lawyers suggest they're actually retiring a year or two early because they see the writing on the wall. And they might retire now because they don't want to adopt new tech. They're, you know, so it'll be interesting to just sort of see. I mean, I think the valuations are high. I think they're a little bit of a.
It's exciting. It's kind of like being alive at the, you know, going back to the beginning of the internet, right? Feels a little bit like that.
Yeah, and you remember what happened then.
Knock on wood. Well, you know what's interesting, because you mentioned legal. So I'm one of these people who, lifetime entrepreneur. My last 3 startups were mortgage, and then insurance professionals, and then elective medicine. So I worked with plastic surgeons, cosmetic dermatologists, med spas. And a lot of the talks that I gave were consistent across all 3, right? They're very consistent. And I definitely came into law with some baked in hypotheses that I'm like, well, it worked in all those three. It's going to, and it is very different, right? Just the buying cycle alone. Like you said, you get a law and how they decide and how management is set up and who ultimately makes a decision. It's very different, right? And you've got to go through layers and layers and layers and layers. And you know, in the elective medical space, we had a principle in sales, and that was if the decision maker, meaning the person, the plastic surgeon or whoever, the doctor wasn't on the call, we were not going to present, because at the end of the day, that person that we present to, the practice manager, whoever it is, can't buy anything. So what's the point, right? Because ultimately she's going to, or he's going to say, I love it. Let me get Dr. Jones and we'll do it again, right? And so we would say, we're not going to do that. If you told somebody in a law firm that you were not going to do a demo until the managing partner was on the phone, you'd never get to the managing partner. And sometimes there's a group and a committee. And
right, well, that's the thing with the law that I think is very hard for people to understand coming in if they aren't lawyers themselves is there are law firm sizes. So there's really, I would say probably 5 different, at least 3 segments, possibly 5, depending on how you look at it, in terms of how you can sort of group together the way they make purchasing decisions. And it's very different. A solo or a very small law firm, the only people in the firm are the lawyers and maybe 1 admin. Then you get to where you have like 10 lawyers and a couple of admin, and it's probably not by committee at that point. It's probably a single lawyer who's been appointed to make the decisions. Yeah. But then when you get to like 20 lawyers, there's probably a committee of 2 or 3 people. When you get to 50 or 100 lawyers, you've got a committee of not just lawyers, but IT, you know, the office manager, and probably 1 other person. And so they have to make a decision over time by committee. And then you get into the large law firms, and there are people in charge, and like the IT or knowledge management or whatever, depending on the type of software, people in charge of the buying process that then will go report to the lawyers probably, but they're the ones that ultimately make the decisions and make the recommendations, and they're just approved by the lawyers. And then forget about practice areas, because different practice areas run their firms completely different. I mean, you mentioned PI and contingency. That's very different from criminal defense lawyers who have a flat fee basically versus civil litigators who handle insurance defense matters who are going to be billing by the hour versus civil litigators who work for commercial, have commercial clients. They're probably going to either have them on retainer and bill by the hour. It all depends. And, you know, it just varies across practice areas, and even within practice areas, depending on the type of matter, they'll either do flat fee or hourly. And their firms are run very different from workflow purposes too. So I just think that it seems super simple when you look at it from the outside, but then when you start to try to sell and start to try to gain momentum, if you don't have people internally that understand what's happening within these firms, you struggle for a while. You need some subject matter experts, and I don't think everyone understands that for a while until the company starts to grow a little.
Yeah, well, and we're going through that process, right? And that's obviously part of the reason why I love this podcast. We have some of the coolest people in the world that have come on. We've been blessed and fortunate to have some amazing guests. It's our 12th episode. And I learn so much from everybody. Each time we get together and talk, I get something a little different. And I learn a lot from the conferences too. So I try to, you know, at least go to 1 or 2 conferences a month and get to know people well. And I get that, you know, I have 2 Inc. 500s under my belt. That qualifies me for nothing in legal, because they're totally different businesses. So you just got to go out, make the relationships, listen as much as you can, and listen to our customers too, right? We learn a lot from each individual customer. And I think it's interesting too, because there's even something as simple as a demand letter, right? The ability to generate a demand. You could show a lawyer on this side of the street a demand letter. That's the most amazing demand letter I've ever seen. You could show it to the lawyer across the street and go, I would never send that piece of trash to my insurance.
Right. It just varies. Yeah, for sure.
How is there not a universal standard to submit a demand to an insurance company? It's like,
well,
I don't get that at all.
Everything, it starts from the very beginning, how you approach. I used to do civil litigation. I practiced law for a decade, and it depends on what you actually think you're going to get out of the case. Sometimes it's going to settle. Other times you're just putting it out there to let them know you're coming and you're going to litigate. And so it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Like the negotiations, it all starts from like the minute you have that touch point with them. So it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish, and also your personal style and how you approach litigation. I mean, it really varies. And even your jurisdiction too. I don't know, a lot of things, different type of case. It varies.
Yeah, it's even interesting inside firms where you have the firms work in pods, right? So you've got a lawyer, a paralegal, and an admin, and there's 10 pods, and each one, they're functioning independently and separately. And that, I think that's the most interesting part of this too, is you could get one part of the firm to be like, that's great, we love it. And then go, but you got to talk to those guys too. It's like,
Yeah.
but I love it. It's been really cool. And as we wind down, a couple of things. One is, what do you see as the next evolution? What's got to give for further adoption to happen in AI outside of some of the things that you mentioned, like more accuracy and some of the ethical considerations? What's the biggest barrier to widespread adoption, in your opinion?
And I think it's the hallucinations, it's accuracy. I mean, that's hands down, that's what prevents people from using it.
Got it.
And, but at the end of the day, I think that there is most of my colleagues and I talk about this, the legal tech journalists. I mean, it's really not a tech failure problem. It's a lawyer competency problem. And I've written some articles about this. You know, doesn't matter if a first-year intern or a first-year law student or a first-year associate gave you a memo. You would review that memo and you have to read the underlying cases. I think that until that lawyer's become experienced and handled, written 15, 20 memos for you, you get to the point where you start to rely on the lawyer and their expertise and their own ability to, make decisions, but you still double check it. Even then, maybe you don't read every single case, but you make sure to double check it and make sure that it makes sense and it's accurate and read some, I don't know, you have an obligation. You're supervising that attorney, just like you're supervising the tech. And so this hallucinations thing, it's the headlines that are scaring everybody. But at the end of the day, you got to review any kind of output and you still save a ton of time if it drafts a memo for you, because you don't have to do that initial grunt work and it gives you at least an outline from which to work, and it saves you a bunch of hours in the process, assuming you're not butting heads with that billable hour requirement we were just saying.
Amen. And that's what we advocate for. We're 80-10-10, right? 80% software can do what it needs to do, the platform. 10% is we do human review for demands and medcons and that type of thing. And then 10%, we say 10%, you got to take a minute. Just make sure it's your tone, your format, your belief system. And like you said, you're already doing that. So the argument becomes, well, if you can get the first 80% without a human, then, and there was an interesting article that came out yesterday, I think it was CNBC, talking about what's happening with AI writ large across all industries and how CEOs are trying to quietly, eliminate on the human capital side while introducing AI, but calling it anything but AI displacement. And, and I'm sure there's concerns of that, right? If you're a paralegal or a law clerk or something, a lot of that work now can, but we just want them to go faster with it. So at the end of the day, you are a prolific author, prolific speaker. What's the best place people listen to podcasts and they go, I want to get to know more of Niki and her stuff. Where would they go to find you?
Probably LinkedIn, or I have a website, NicoleBlackESQ.com.
Got it.
One of those.
NicoleBlackESQ.com.
Yep.
Or Nicole Black on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Got it. Well, I certainly appreciate having you on. Exactly as billed. I knew we were going to get the inside scoop. I feel like this is why I do it. I feel like I can, congratulations on all your success. I really appreciate your honest insights today. Certainly great for our listeners. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us again, sponsored by Legal Keys is sponsored by Faster Outcomes, the ultimate legal intelligence platform for law firms and lawyers of all shapes and sizes. Thanks, Niki. Have a great day.